Isabel Duarte washed dishes in the old stone-tiled kitchen, where the soft amber glow from a hanging lamp shimmered on the glazed surface of porcelain plates. She was humming an old melody, almost forgotten, surviving only in the memories of those who once heard her grandmother sing it to sleep. Isabel didn't know that just beyond the wooden doorway stood the eyes of Eduardo Salazar, the man to whom the villa belonged. He hadn't planned to be home that day, but a sudden change in his schedule brought him back earlier than expected. And there he saw her, a stranger, unaware she was being watched, singing while she worked, as if this kitchen belonged to her. Eduardo didn't move. Something held him there, something he couldn't name. Was it her voice, the stillness, or the invisible light surrounding her? It was a feeling he thought he had lost long ago. The villa, with its long corridors and neoclassical rooms, had never housed something like this before. Isabel was only there because of a clerical error made by the staffing agency. But fate sometimes keeps us, has its own strange way of bringing two people together, starting with a moment that seems like nothing at all. That fleeting moment could have passed like so many others in Eduardo's life, moments when he caught sight of something beautiful only to let it fade. But this time was different. The voice lingered in the air, and the image of that unfamiliar woman in his kitchen refused to leave his mind. The Salazar Villa sat on a quiet hill at the edge of Lisbon, built in neoclassical style with tall white columns and dark red tiles. To outsiders, it was a symbol of success, the home of one of Portugal's most renowned architects. But inside, it was a monument of silence. Eduardo Salazar had lived alone ever since his marriage fell apart 4 years ago. His son Gabriel lived with his mother in Porto and rarely visited. The house, once built to accommodate a family, was now occupied by no one but Eduardo and the echo of his own footsteps. Everything in the villa was perfect. Oil paintings aligned precisely, polished ebony bookshelves, hardwood floors that whispered under his shoes. Yet something essential was missing, something Eduardo no longer dared to name: life. He had never bothered to learn the names of the cleaning staff who came by schedule. They arrived, worked quietly, and left. But Isabel was different. She folded tablecloths with both hands, as if folding a memory. She seasoned soup not just with a spoon, but with instinct. She opened the kitchen windows to let sunlight flood in, something no one else had done since the house was built. Those small acts caught Eduardo's attention. At first it was unfamiliar, then curiosity, and eventually habit. He began staying home more often, claiming he needed to review documents or work remotely. One afternoon, he stood at the second-floor corridor, looking down at the dining room from the balcony. Isabel was setting the table, softly singing an old love song. Her voice lacked polish, but there was something in it, something that comforted. That day, when Isabel entered the study carrying a cup of tea, Eduardo asked without thinking, "Do you always sing while you work?" Isabel paused, slightly embarrassed. "Most of the time, I suppose. My grandmother taught me to sing when I was little. She used to say, 'A kitchen without music is like a home without children.'" Eduardo smiled. He had never realized how lonely that could sound until now. That evening, he sat down to eat Isabel's roasted chicken. For the first time in months, he didn't dine alone. They didn't say much, but the silence between them wasn't heavy. Instead, it was a language all its own, where presence said more than words ever could. Isabel noticed Eduardo watching her, but couldn't decipher what it meant. All she knew was that she was in a stranger's home, doing a job she wasn't even sure she could keep. Yet for some reason, every day she returned, it felt more peaceful. And Eduardo began to wonder, perhaps a home wasn't only built of stone and wood, but also of small, quiet moments that somehow mattered more than anything else. Isabel always left the villa on time, never staying a minute longer than necessary. Eduardo had thought it was just professionalism, but over time he realized it was a boundary, invisible but firm. Behind her gentle calm was a world he hadn't touched. Her small apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building in Bairro Alto. Narrow hallways, creaky wooden stairs, and a window facing a tangle of electrical wires. But inside it was neat, warm, and quiet. Except when Leo, her younger brother, became unsettled. Leo had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia at 15. Now 23, he still lived with Isabel, relying on strict routines of medication, meals, and therapy, when they could afford it. Isabel never went out at night, never attended events, had little social life. Every cent she earned circled back to Leo. That morning, as she was leaving, Isabel received a call from the staffing agency. "Miss Isabel, we just discovered an error in your assignment. You were scheduled to work at Mr. Eduardo Suarez's home, not Mr. Eduardo Salazar's. We sincerely apologize." Isabel froze. Her heart pounded. "But I've been working there for almost a week." "Yes, and Mr. Salazar didn't notify us of the mistake. We're contacting both parties to resolve it." She hung up, shaken. She couldn't afford to lose the job. Not now. Leo's medication would run out by the end of weekend. The electric bill was overdue. Any disruption could bring everything crashing down. That afternoon, while cleaning the study, Isabel hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Salazar, I just learned there's been a mix-up. The agency says I was assigned to a different household. I'm sorry if this has caused inconvenience." Eduardo looked up from his blueprint, surprised. "A mix-up? Yes, I was supposed to be elsewhere. I'll leave, if you prefer." He paused, then shook his head. "I don't want you to go anywhere." His simple reply startled her. The contract? I don't care about the contract. I care that my kitchen doesn't feel empty in the morning. Stay until I say otherwise." Nothing more was said. Isabel nodded and left the room, heart still pounding, not from fear, but relief. That night, when she returned home, Leo was standing in the living room, speaking to someone invisible. His voice was low, urgent, arguing. Isabel wasn't alarmed. She approached, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said gently, "Leo, it's just a hallucination. No one's talking about you. Let's take your meds, okay?" Leo hesitated, then nodded, sitting down. Isabel fetched water and handed him the pill, routine, like so many nights before. A part of her life she never brought into the villa, never spoke of during quiet dinners with Eduardo. Inside her lived two separate worlds, one filled with the gentleness Eduardo saw, and another, brimming with responsibility and fatigue, she kept hidden. And Eduardo, skilled architect though he was, had never glimpsed that blueprint. That evening, Lisbon was colder than usual. Eduardo had stayed home all day, never once stepping out of the villa. Isabel noticed by the cardigan draped over the dining chair, a habit he only had when working from home. She placed a steaming plate of pasta on the table, then added 2 glasses of red wine, poured from a bottle Eduardo had left on the bar that morning. She didn't ask, she just poured. Somehow, a quiet form of understanding had begun to form between them. Eduardo entered just as Isabel was straightening the tablecloth. He sat down with a nod, his eyes holding the faint weight of fatigue. "Smells amazing. Mushroom pasta. I added a bit of nutmeg, the way my grandmother used to," Eduardo chuckled softly. "Rare and genuine." "You mention your grandmother a lot. She must have meant a great deal to you." Isabel hesitated for a moment. "She's the only family I remember clearly. After our parents passed, she raised me and Leo. She was a wonderful cook. She believed every meal had a soul, if you knew how to listen to it." She smiled, half apologetic, half nostalgic. "I know it sounds silly." Eduardo shook his head. "No, actually, I'm jealous." That caught Isabel by surprise. Jealous? He set his wine down, gaze drifting to somewhere beyond the room. "I never had that. My family was formal. Dinner was for performance, not memories." Isabel said nothing. She simply placed another slice of toast on his plate. Later, as the meal wound down, Eduardo exhaled deeply. "You once asked why I always look tired. Tonight, I'll answer." Isabel didn't speak, just listened. "I have a son, Gabriel. He lives with his mother in Porto. He's autistic, severe." He paused, then went on. "I'm not a good father. I tried, but not enough. And for a long time I buried that truth under work." Isabel set down her cutlery, her eyes softening. "You're not the first to do that, but you're one of the few who admits it. Eduardo gave a half smile, wearied but honest. Maybe, but still. Every time I hear you sing in the kitchen, I remember Gabriel as a boy. He loved sounds. He used to laugh at boiling water, the clink of a spoon in a glass. Now, I'm not sure he even remembers my face. Isabel said nothing. Not because she lacked words, but because some pain needs only to be witnessed. She stood, began clearing the table, unhurried. Eduardo remained seated, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the window. As she washed the dishes, Isabel began to hum again, an old lullaby, wordless, just melody floating through the air like a thin thread connecting two quiet souls. For the first time, Eduardo didn't just hear, he stayed until she rinsed the final plate. 2 weeks after that dinner, Eduardo hosted a charity event sponsored by his architecture firm, a fundraiser for a public park renovation project in Lisbon. It was an elegant but intimate evening, with guests from architecture, design, and a few from the arts scene. Isabel had no idea she'd be part of it. She was simply asked to help plan the menu and support the kitchen team for the night. But near the end of the event, as conversations began to lull after dinner, Eduardo stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand. Tonight is about public projects, but if you'll allow me a personal indulgence, I want to share a surprise. He looked straight at Isabel, who stood by the serving table in the corner. She froze when he continued. In recent weeks, I've heard a voice I believe shouldn't remain hidden. She's a humble soul, and she might be upset with me for doing this, but I hope you'll all pause and listen. This wasn't on the program. Isabel's heart pounded. She shook her head slightly as Eduardo nodded toward her, inviting. But with the silent encouragement of the staff nearby and the hush slowly falling over the room, she knew there was no graceful way out. Slowly, Isabel stepped onto the stage. No instruments, no accompaniment. Just her beneath the soft yellow light. She took a deep breath and began to sing. A Portuguese folk song. Simple lyrics. Gentle like wind. Her voice didn't need to be flawless, it was true. Perhaps that honesty was what made the room so utterly still. When she finished, there was no immediate applause. Just a moment of profound silence, as if everyone was holding something inside. Then, one pair of hands clapped, then more. A long, heartfelt ovation. Eduardo, watching from the edge of the stage, smiled. He said nothing. He didn't need to, but the consequences began just days later. A man appeared near Isabel's apartment, well-dressed, carrying a business card and recorder, introducing himself as Miguel Aranda, a music producer. He said he'd heard her sing at the charity event and wanted to help her career. Isabel was surprised and wary. I'm not pursuing a music career. But you should. Your voice. There's something I can't quite describe. It's real, and the industry needs that. She felt a chill down her spine. How did you know where I live? Miguel gave a slight smile. I have contacts everywhere. I just want to invite you for a coffee. No pressure. Isabel declined, walked straight into the building, never turning back. A vague, unnamed fear gnawed at her. She didn't tell Eduardo. Not yet. 2 days later, Leo, who rarely answered the door, called her mid-shift. Sis, someone knocked. Asked for you. Said they're an old friend, but... They kept looking inside like they were searching for something. Isabel went pale. She left the villa early, rushed home. No one was near the apartment anymore, but a note was wedged under the door. Call me. Don't waste this chance. M.A. She tore it up. The feeling of being invaded had never been clearer. That night, as she cleaned after dinner at the villa, Eduardo noticed Isabel was distant. She wasn't singing, didn't open the window, didn't speak. Is something wrong? He asked. She shook her head, tried to smile, but in her eyes was something Eduardo hadn't seen before. Fear. He didn't press, but in his chest a quiet alarm had started, that the fragile peace between them was now being threatened by something from the outside world. And this time, he knew he couldn't just watch. Eduardo didn't press further, but he knew something had shifted. Isabel was no longer the quiet, composed woman of the kitchen. Between them now stretched a thin silence, like a thread that could snap at any moment. 3 days later, a large envelope appeared in Isabel's mailbox. No return address, only for Miss Duarte. Inside was a pre-signed recording contract, with Miguel Aranda's signature at the bottom, a USB stick, and a handwritten note. "Listen to the demo. You deserve more than that, kitchen." Her hands trembled. She didn't plug in the USB, nor did she read the full contract. One thought pulsed in her mind. Who gave him her address? She had never shared personal details at the charity event. Eduardo couldn't or shouldn't be the one, but if not him, then who? That evening in the villa's kitchen, Isabel couldn't hide her tension. Eduardo noticed. At first he said nothing, but when she knocked over a spice jar, something she'd never done, he finally spoke. "Isabel, are you okay?" She nodded, avoiding his eyes. Eduardo waited a few beats, then stepped closer. "I'm used to your silence, but tonight it feels different. Did something happen?" She looked up, eyes guarded for the first time. "I think someone gave my information to a stranger, a music producer." Eduardo frowned. "Miguel Aranda?" She froze. "How do you know his name?" "He left his card with me after the event. Said he saw potential. I didn't think it was worth passing on. I didn't give it to anyone." Isabel was quiet. "He showed up near my apartment, knew my brother's name, my floor, sent a contract to my home. That's not just potential." Eduardo's face darkened. "I'll look into it. I have contacts in media. I can—" "No, thank you," Isabel interrupted, polite but firm. "I just want to help." "I know, but I'm used to helping myself." The silence that followed weighed heavier than any between them before. The next day, Isabel didn't come to the villa. She texted Eduardo saying Leo wasn't feeling well. It wasn't entirely untrue. Leo was having one of his difficult days, but mostly she needed space, to breathe, to redraw the line between safe and dangerously sweet. Meanwhile, Eduardo began digging. He contacted an old friend, Victor Almeida, creative director of a media firm. Victor had handled the guest list, had access to logistics staff. "Aranda's trouble?" Victor said after a quick check. 3 women accused him of overstepping boundaries. Nothing stuck, no proof. How did he get Isabel's info? Victor hesitated. "Could be someone from my team. Could be he paid someone off. I can't rule that out." Eduardo gripped the phone. "Did you give it to him? Are you accusing me?" "No, but I need to know who made her feel hunted," Victor sighed. "Eduardo, are you sure you're not too close already?" Eduardo didn't answer. On the 3rd day, Isabel returned. She knocked on the kitchen door, carrying a box of pastel de nata. "Eduardo's confessed, only childhood joy." He was surprised, not just by her return, but by her eyes. No longer frightened. Calm. Resolute. "I'm sorry for leaving suddenly. I needed time." "You don't owe me anything. You have every right to protect your space." She set the box on the counter. "Safety is fragile, Mr. Salazar. I can't control the world outside, but I can choose who I let near." Eduardo said nothing, but in his eyes was something that resembled understanding, and maybe, just maybe, hope. The news broke on Monday morning. A nearly 2,000-word article appeared on a major online outlet, headlined boldly, "Housekeeper or Lover? Secrets Behind Architect Eduardo Salazar's Villa." Alongside it was a zoomed-in photo, Isabel leaving the villa, her face obscured by a mask, but her figure and the setting unmistakable. She read the article while on the tram and felt as though she'd been stripped bare in public. Every sentence pierced through the privacy she'd fought so hard to maintain. Vague mentions of her living situation, hints about Leo's condition, and a dramatized orphan narrative turned into something pitiful, almost mocking. Isabel got off at the next station, heart racing, hands shaking. She called Eduardo. I didn't know anything about this. His voice was tense, I swear. My brother read it, Eduardo. He's panicking. He thinks the world is staring into our home. I'm coming over. 30 minutes later, Eduardo stood at the door of her small apartment. He carried nothing but a coat and an unfiltered look of guilt. Leo wouldn't open the door. He was locked in his room, arguing with voices only he could hear. Isabel sat outside the door, holding a glass of water, pleading with him to take his medication. But her words, this time, weren't reaching him. Eduardo knelt beside her. Can I try? She hesitated, then nodded. He tapped gently on the door. Gabriel, my son, used to do this too. I spent 2 hours outside his door once, but I never said a word. I just stood there. He paused, then softly continued. That was a mistake. I should have spoken. I should have told him he wasn't alone. His voice was calm, not forceful, not invasive. Leo, you're not alone. You have your sister, and now you have me too. There was no reply, but minutes later, the lock clicked. The door cracked open. Leo didn't look at anyone, just extended his hand. Isabel placed the pill in his palm along with the water. He swallowed, then returned to the room and shut the door, this time without locking it. Isabel leaned back against the wall, exhaling like she'd just stepped out of a storm. Eduardo stayed quiet. After a moment, he spoke gently. Pack a bag, both of you. Come stay at the villa for now. There's security, there's privacy. I won't ask anything else. But I won't let you and your brother face this alone. For the first time, Isabel didn't say no. She simply nodded. The Salazar villa now housed 2 more souls. No media knew. Eduardo had hired a legal team to keep everything silent, but the outside world stayed loud. Every day, Isabel saw her name in headlines. From maid to muse, the mystery woman in the architect's shadow. They rewrote her life like a cheap movie. She hated how they stripped her of her right to be herself. After a week of silence and self-defense, Isabel spoke up. They were sitting on the back steps of the garden, late sunlight stretching over the grass. I don't want to hide forever. I've been hiding my whole life, Eduardo. He turned to her. Didn't rush, didn't interrupt. I thought if I kept everything sealed, the world couldn't hurt me, but I was wrong. They still came, still made up things. So why not tell the truth myself? Eduardo nodded slowly. If you're ready, I'll be there. 3 days later, they sat side by side at a modest press conference in a public library in Lisbon. No glamour, no red carpet, just a long table, a plain backdrop, and neatly arranged chairs. Isabel wore a white blouse, hair tied up. Eduardo dressed down, no tie, no blazer. Before them sat dozens of reporters, flashes going off non-stop. Their spokesperson opened. No lawsuits, no scandal, just 2 people reclaiming their voice. Then Isabel took the microphone, her voice steady but not cold. My name is Isabel Duarte. I come from an ordinary neighborhood. I'm not a singer. I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a woman with a brother who needs me and a past I never shared beyond a kitchen. She looked to the back of the room where Leo sat with a therapist. He waved, smiling. She smiled back. In the past weeks, I've been called names I don't recognize. But today, I want to share a project Mr. Salazar and I are launching. Something that truly matters. Eduardo continued. The project is called the Quiet Voices Initiative. We're building a community center for people with developmental disorders and their caregivers. A space where they can be heard, supported, and seen as full human beings. A journalist raised his hand. Is this your way of cleaning up your relationship with Ms. Duarte? Eduardo looked him square in the eye. No. This is my way of apologizing to my son for once being too afraid to stand up for him. The room quieted, not awkward but attentively. After the conference, Eduardo and Isabel exited through the back. Leo walked between them, silent but holding his sister's hand tightly. No cameras, no questions. Just the evening sun and 3 soft footsteps. That night, in the villa's living room, Eduardo uncorked a bottle of wine he'd saved for years. Not to celebrate, but to mark something. "To truth," he said, raising his glass, "even if it comes late." Isabel clinked her glass gently. "And to courage, even if it takes a lifetime." Near midnight, as the house lay still, a soft voice sang from the kitchen, not for an audience, simply because she could. A week after the press conference, life at the Salazar Villa returned to a quiet rhythm, but no longer a lonely one. Leo had begun exploring the back garden. He liked sitting beneath the orange tree, doodling on blank sheets Isabel left for him. Eduardo often passed by, smiling, but never intruded. He understood. To make someone feel safe, you first had to give them space. Isabel returned to the kitchen, her space, claimed not by duty, but by choice. She cooked, hummed softly, opened the windows to let the light pour in. There were no curious stares anymore, just the quiet presence of people who understood and didn't need to ask. That evening, after dinner, Eduardo brought out 2 cups of tea. "Do you find it too quiet now?" he asked, voice low. Isabel smiled. "No, I think, for the first time in my life, quiet doesn't feel empty." They sat in silence for a long while. Steam curled between them. In the garden, soft lights lit each pathway in gentle gold. Eduardo looked at her, then said slowly, "I used to think I'd built spaces for others, but the truth is, I never knew what a home was, not until someone truly lived in it." Isabel didn't respond right away. She just looked at him, a long, still look, as if everything that needed saying had passed between them without words. That night, she stood in the kitchen long after everyone had gone to bed, doing nothing, just standing there, one hand resting on the cool stone counter. No music, no humming, only a quiet warmth blooming in her chest. Not love, not exactly gratitude, but something deeper, something born of perfect empathy. Isabel stood quietly in the kitchen, her hand resting on the cool stone, her chest warmed by an unnamed feeling. Not love, not exactly gratitude, but something deeper, born of perfect empathy. The next morning, light rain fell over Lisbon, a thin curtain across the city, softening everything. Isabel was drying dishes when Eduardo appeared at the kitchen door, shirt half-buttoned, holding a stack of papers. "I have a meeting at City Hall," he said, his voice holding something unsaid. Isabel nodded gently. She handed him a blue handkerchief he often forgot in his coat pocket. "It's raining, take this." He looked at the cloth, then at her, surprised she'd remembered such a small detail. "Thank you, you always remember everything." "Not everything, just what no one else does." The words, light as air, made the room pause for a moment. Eduardo tucked the handkerchief away. Before leaving, he hesitated, then stepped closer, very close. "Isabel, yes, if you don't mind, may I give you a hug?" She smiled, not because she was surprised, but because the question had lived in the silence between them for so long, waiting for someone brave enough to ask. She nodded. The hug wasn't passionate, it wasn't posed, it was simply one lonely soul touching another equally lonely. He said nothing, neither did she. But they both knew something had changed. In the weeks that followed, Eduardo shifted his rhythm. He woke earlier, spent quiet mornings with Leo brewing tea while the boy drew. He didn't speak much, but he was present. Isabel saw it, and she knew Eduardo's love spoke in consistency. She changed too, no longer closing windows in the morning, no longer turning down coffee invites from volunteers at the community center. She even started piano lessons with Eduardo's old teacher, a retired musician with silver hair and kind hands. Each evening, after dinner, with Leo upstairs, they sat in the living room sipping tea, listening to old records. Sometimes they didn't say a word, but they didn't need to. One night, Eduardo placed his hand gently over hers. No warning, no permission, but not abrupt. Isabel didn't pull away. This new life wasn't a fairy tale. Not every day was sunny, not everyone outside was kind. But for the first time, neither of them feared being seen. They were no longer two people living in separate, silent worlds. They had chosen to live together in the real one, where empathy, honesty, and quiet embraces were the foundation of a new chapter.